I came home from my husband's funeral to tell my parents and sister that he had left me $8.5 million and 6 luxury Manhattan lofts. They hadn't showed up to the service, claiming my sister had an emergency. But when I quietly walked into their living room, I overheard them talking, and what they were saying made my blood run cold. "The funeral is over," my mother's voice rang out, devoid of any grief. "If the psychiatrist signs off on the mental incompetence papers today, we can legally commit her by the weekend. Once she's in the facility, we take full control of the estate." My own family wasn't mourning my husband. They were actively planning to have me declared insane to steal my inheritance. They thought I was a grieving, broken widow they could easily crush. They had no idea I was standing right at the door, recording every single word. My name is Maya. I'm only 26 years old, a time when most people are just beginning to build their lives, their careers, and their forever memories. But instead of planning for a bright future, I spent the last 3 months watching the love of my life fade away. My husband, Julian, was a brilliant, self-made real estate investor. He possessed a sharp mind for business, but an even greater heart. When a sudden, aggressive illness took him from me, my world fractured entirely. The day of his funeral was a blur of heavy rain and suffocating grief. I sat in the front pew of the chapel, desperately looking over my shoulder every time the heavy wooden doors swung open. I was waiting for my family, my father, Richard, my mother, Eleanor, and my younger sister, Chloe. I needed them. I needed my mother's arms around me, my father's steady presence, and my sister's comfort. But as the service began and the eulogy was read, their designated seats remained completely empty. It was humiliating. Whispers rippled through the mourning crowd as people noticed that the widow's own family had completely ghosted her in her darkest hour. Just before the burial, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. It read, "So sorry. Chloe had a severe medical emergency. We're at the house taking care of her. Can't make it." A cold spike of adrenaline cut through my numbness. Panic for my sister took over. The moment the service concluded, I didn't even stay for the reception. Leaving the graveyard behind, I drove straight to my parents' house, my black funeral dress soaked from the rain, my heart pounding with terror for Chloe. I pulled into my parents' driveway, my hands shaking against the steering wheel. Seeing no ambulance and an eerie quiet hanging over the property, I scrambled out of the car. I rushed up the porch steps, ready to burst through the front door, but paused when I realized it was entirely unlatched. Pushing it open a fraction of an inch, the heavy silence of the house was shattered not by tears or medical panic, but by the distinct, rhythmic pop of a champagne cork. Instinctively, a cold dread locked my limbs in place. I pulled out my phone and switched on the video recording, intending to document whatever twisted lie they were preparing to tell me. Instead, my lens captured a scene that shattered my heart into a million unrepairable pieces. There, in the center of the brightly lit living room, were my parents and Chloe. They were laughing, clinking crystal flutes filled with expensive champagne, celebrating while Julian was being lowered into the frozen earth. To a flawless execution, my father toasted, a smug grin plastered across his face. My mother took a slow sip, her voice dripping with calculated malice as she spoke. "The funeral is officially over. Richard, did you confirm with Dr. Haynes? If the psychiatrist signs off on the mental incompetence papers today, we can legally commit her by the weekend. Once she's locked away in the facility, she won't be able to touch a single dime." Chloe giggled, swirling her drink. "I can't believe that idiot Julian actually managed to amass 85 million cash and 6 prime Manhattan lofts. Maya doesn't deserve any of it. She's weak. The grief will make it so easy to prove she's completely lost her mind." The betrayal cut through me like a razor, but as I stood in the shadows of the hallway, the initial wave of blinding heartache morphed into something entirely different. It became a cold, calculating resolve. Over the last 4 years, Julian hadn't just loved me. He had taught me how to read people, how to spot an ambush, and how to negotiate from a position of hidden strength. My family thought I was a fragile, broken little girl they could easily manipulate. Fine. I would give them exactly the performance they were looking for. I quietly stopped the recording, safely backed up the video file to my secure cloud storage, and took a deep, shaky breath. Rubbing my eyes until they were red, I deliberately messed up my hair, took off my coat, and stumbled heavily into the living room. The transition was instantaneous. The champagne glasses vanished behind couch cushions as my mother rushed toward me, her face twisting into a mask of synthetic horror. Oh, my poor, sweet Maya. We were just praying for you. I let my knees buckle slightly, allowing her to catch me as I let out a hollow sob. Chloe. The text said Chloe was dying. I whimpered, making my voice sound thin, scattered, and completely unhinged. She's resting, darling. A terrible panic attack. My father lied smoothly, patting my shoulder with a cold hand. You look completely exhausted, Maya. Delusional even. You clearly aren't capable of processing reality right now. I'm not, I whispered, staring blankly into space. Julian left so much behind. 85 million, the Lofts. The lawyers say it's a huge mess. I don't even know what papers I'm signing anymore. I saw the greedy spark flash in my father's eyes. The trap was set. The trap was set, and less than 24 hours later, my family eagerly walked right into it. The next afternoon, a sharp knock echoed through my empty house. When I opened the door, my parents stood there with an unfamiliar, older man in a tailored gray suit. He possessed a clinical, detached smile that immediately made my skin crawl. Maya, sweetheart, my mother purred, forcing her way into my foyer. We couldn't sleep last night worrying about your fragile mental state. We brought an old family friend, Dr. Haynes. He's a highly respected psychiatrist, and he's just here to help you process your overwhelming grief. I blankly nodded, playing my part flawlessly as I led them into the living room. I made sure to stumble slightly, letting my eyes wander aimlessly around the room. What they didn't know was that while they were busy planning my downfall, I had spent the morning installing high-definition hidden cameras and military-grade audio recorders in every single corner of the room. Dr. Haynes sat across from me, pulling out a leather-bound notepad. He began asking highly manipulative, leading questions, deliberately twisting my words. Maya, do you feel like the reality of Julian's death is too much to bear? Do you find yourself unable to make rational decisions for your own safety? Everything feels like a nightmare, I whimpered, staring at my hands. I can't even think straight. My father quickly leaned forward, sliding a legal document onto the coffee table.
We know, sweetie.
That's why you need to sign this temporary management release. It just lets us handle your banking while you recover. I signed it with a trembling hand. They smirked, believing they had just stripped away my freedom. In reality, they had just documented their own criminal extortion. 4 days later, the time had finally come to spring the trap. I extended an exclusive invitation to my parents, Chloe and Dr. Haynes, for an intimate celebratory dinner at the crown jewel of Julian's estate, a breathtaking $10 million penthouse loft overlooking the shimmering Manhattan skyline. They arrived dressed to the nines, their faces radiating a smug, insufferable arrogance. They walked across the polished concrete floors like conquerors who had already successfully stolen the kingdom, believing this dinner was my official surrender. Bianca, Chloe's upscale friend who always tagged along for free luxury, was even there, marveling at the floor-to-ceiling windows. My mother practically floated to her seat, treating the crystal dinnerware as if it already belonged to her. Throughout the multi-course meal, they toasted to new beginnings and dropped passive-aggressive comments about my extreme fragility and how glad they were that I was letting them take over the heavy burden of the $85 million. I just smiled, politely nodded, and bided my time. Midway through the main course, I tapped my spoon against my crystal wine glass, standing up at the head of the long mahogany table. The room grew quiet as they all looked up, expecting a tearful speech of gratitude. I want to thank you all for being here, I began, my voice completely stripped of the shaky, broken widow act. It was cold, sharp, and commanding. And I especially want to thank you for showing your true colors on the day of Julian's funeral. Before my father could speak, I picked up a remote control and pressed a single button. The automated blackout shades crashed down, plunging the loft into darkness. A second later, the massive, state-of-the-art projector screen lowered from the ceiling, illuminating the room with a crystal-clear, high-definition video playback that made the air completely leave the room. The screen exploded to life, playing the crisp video of my family clinking champagne glasses on the day of Julian's funeral. My mother's recorded voice echoed loudly through the penthouse, detailing their sick plot to use Dr. Haynes to lock me away in an asylum. As they sat frozen in absolute horror, the video automatically cut to the footage from my living room, showing Dr. Haynes feeding me leading questions while my father forced a pen into my hand. The lights flickered back on. My family was dead silent, their faces completely drained of color. You think you played me? I asked, as the heavy double doors of the loft opened. 3 sharply dressed individuals in dark suits stepped into the dining room. This is my legal team. Richard, that document you greedily forced me to sign wasn't an estate transfer. It was a carefully drafted legal trap. By presenting it under the guise of medical necessity while conspiring on tape, you just executed a legally binding admission of financial coercion, elder/dependent extortion, and wire fraud. My father stood up, his hands shaking violently as he looked at the lawyers. Maya, please, we can talk about this. There is nothing left to talk about, I replied coldly, sliding a new set of papers across the mahogany table. Here is my ultimate blueprint for your survival. You and Mother will immediately sign over your house and every single one of your personal bank accounts to a charity for victims of domestic abuse. Dr. Haynes, you will sign this confession and voluntarily surrender your medical license. If any of you hesitate for even a single second, my attorneys will instantly send the raw, unedited footage directly to the FBI. You have exactly 2 minutes to decide between total financial ruin or spending the next 20 years of your lives in a federal prison cell. The silence in the penthouse was suffocating as the timer ticked down. With their hands visibly trembling and tears of anger spilling down Chloe's face, they signed. They didn't have a choice. The alternative was a cold federal prison cell. The aftermath was swift and completely merciless. My parents were forced to liquidate everything they owned to fulfill the terms of the settlement, ultimately sliding into absolute bankruptcy and moving into a cramped, depressing apartment outside the city. Chloe was completely cut off, left without a single dime of family support, and was forced to get a low-paying retail job just to survive. Dr. Haynes surrendered his medical license in disgrace before the board could permanently strip it from him. As for me, I sold the luxury lofts and used the $85 million to establish the Julian Vanguard Foundation, a nationwide legal network that actively protects vulnerable women from severe family financial exploitation. Standing on the balcony of my new home, looking out at the endless horizon, I finally felt a deep sense of peace. Julian's legacy wasn't just protected, it was actively saving lives.